You can have a seat. Or if you want to stand the whole time, you can do that as well. That'll be awesome. Well, good morning to you all. How are ya? Great. This section's great. That section's silent. We're in the second part of a series that we're calling Ebenezer, just a couple weeks, where we're talking about stories. We're talking about things that God has done in people's lives. Just 2 weeks ago, we rallied around the resurrection, Easter Sunday morning or Saturday night, and we really celebrated the fact that Christ rose from the dead, and we respond to that. That's what our faith is really all about. And we decided we wanted to do a couple weeks where you hear people's stories, and there's stories of things that had happened in ordinary people's lives and God's sustaining power through those times. You know, if this idea, this word Ebenezer, it comes from back in 1 Samuel 7:12. And it says this: Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen. He named it Ebenezer, saying, "Thus far the Lord has helped us." It was at a time of war. It's something that many of you can relate to, not necessarily a time of war, but like if God doesn't come through for us, we're toast. Have you ever put yourself in a situation where you knew it was God because he moved and you saw it? That's really what it's saying. And so this Ebenezer literally means the stone of the help. It's identifying that without God, this could not have happened. It doesn't make sense. This is improbable. So really, raising an Ebenezer is simply a monumental stone set up to signify the great help that God granted the one raising the stone. It's a tangible thing. And so last week, as Pastor Steve shared his story, and if you missed that, I encourage you to go online and watch Steve's story about how God had continued to help him. And this morning, we're going to take another story of an ordinary person that God did amazing things in. When I was 8 years old, there was a family at my church that I was at, and I remember this very vividly. They came up to me and showed me a picture and said, "This is a young boy that we are your age, Dale, and we're going to adopt him." And it was like that week. And they said, "And now you will be friends with him." And at 8 years old, all right, I'll be friends with him. No, really, Dale, he's going to need friends, and you're going to be his friend. So we were friends. His name was Stephen, and we spent time at his house. He spent time at my house. We went to camps together. We went to church together. We went to school together for a while, and we spent about 3 years of our lives doing a lot of stuff together. But during that time, there were some torturous things happening in our lives as well. At the age of 11, our lives split as he moved to Southern California, and I stayed where I was. And it wasn't until about 4 or 5 years ago that we reconnected on Facebook. So they're a little shout out for Facebook, I guess. And our lives, as we started to connect and started to hear what God had done in his life. So we're going to look at his story today, and I am confident that you will be challenged and blessed through this. There are times, though, we have to look at the very dark side of things to truly see how amazing God's sustenance is. You'll see this all throughout the book of Psalms. They don't show up on our calendars because we always put the happy Psalms on our calendars. But the beginning of so many Psalms is, "God, where are you? Why have you forsaken me? Why are you letting my enemies triumph over me? Where are you?" But through all those Psalms, towards the end, at the very end of each one, it's like, "But God, I know you are my Father. You have sustained me." It's like purging our soul. So the first half of this story is in a video form. But I'm telling you, as in the middle of this video, and you're like, what? This is way beyond, I want happy feelings at church. We are going to raise an Ebenezer today, okay? There is hope. There is glory in this. But I want you to see first half of Curtis's story through video, and then we're going to come up afterwards and talk about what amazing things God did in his life from that point on. So watch this with us.
I was born in San Francisco in 1966 and put up for adoption. I spent 3 months in foster care as a newborn baby and then was adopted by a family named the Dentons. I was really hyperactive, high anxiety. I was a really active kid. I don't remember a whole lot of positive stuff in that family. I was in trouble a lot. There was one time in the family where I got in trouble and I was sent to my room, and the rest of the family was going to the mountains to go play in the snow, and I was left behind. One day they decided that they couldn't handle me and it was time to go to foster care. They were going to take me to a foster home and drop me off. They dropped me off and they told me this is a temporary thing. We just need a break from you, and you'll probably get to come home. My parents would come back and visit from time to time, and one day they came back and they took me to a dinosaur museum, and we were hanging out and having a good time. And then on the way home, I remember it, we're sitting in the front seat of the car. I was sitting in the middle, and we're driving down the freeway, and it's pouring down rain. And they tell me, this is it. We can't see you anymore. We're giving you up. And I remember crying a lot from then until I got home. And they dropped me off, and I never saw them again. So again, I was put up for adoption, except for this time I was 7 years old. I remember the first family I stayed with for a weekend. I knocked a toaster off the shelf and hit the floor. So I went back to my foster home, and every Monday after you visit a home, your social worker comes in and says, hey, so what do you think of this family? Do you think this is a family you would like to have as a mom and dad? And I would say yes all the time. And after that visit, I never heard back anything from that family, so I kind of picked up that I screwed it up. I knocked the toaster off the thing. They don't want me because of that. I guess a couple of weeks later, another family is looking to adopt me. I go and visit this family. They've got a red bike, and I'm told, yeah, if you come live with us, you get this bike, and you get this little car, and you can do all these things, and you have 2 sisters. And the Saturday comes along, and it's time to go to dinner, get ready for dinner, and it's time to get cleaned up. At this time, the dad of that family sexually abused me in the shower that night. And he told me, this is what love is. We don't tell anybody about this, but this is what love is. No one's ever loved you before, and this is love. What do I know? I mean, my first family just dropped me off in a foster home at age 7 and left me. So, all right. So I get back to my foster home, and I didn't say anything about this to anyone. I was told not to. And they came in and said, hey, would you like that to be your mom and dad? And I was like, yeah. I'll be in that family. I'll have a sister, and I won't be in foster care all my life or whatever. It was a done deal. I was going to go and live with them. And at that time, my last name became Denning. My name was Stephen Denning. Before that, when my first name, I was Stephen Denton. So I thought it was weird that I went from Stephen Denton to Stephen Denning, and the similarities were always so close. And I always kind of thought about that. And I became Stephen Denning, and I had a mom and dad. I got new friends put in my life, started going to church on a regular basis. The first year, he led me to Christ. The first year I was in that church, I became a Christian at age 8. And that's where my whole belief began. I didn't know at the time, but he was molesting other boys in this church. That no one knew about. And I didn't understand the whole God part of my story at this point in my life. You know, I think one of the factors that makes me and God so distant, not as much now, but back then, I mean, Dan Denning led me to Christ. I mean, the same guy that abused me for 3 years, sexually molested me for 3 years, led me to Christ. I remember time and time again becoming a Christian again because it didn't work. Oh, you become a Christian and all this great stuff. Overnight, you'll be a different person. You'll feel so much different. Okay, it didn't work. Doing it again. It didn't work, you know. And at the time, I didn't know I thought I was the only one being loved, as he called it. So I came home from school one day and found my mom and my 2 sisters in the kitchen crying, and I asked, well, what's going on? My mom said, we're getting divorced. And they told me it was because my dad was doing some things that he shouldn't be doing with other kids. They asked me, is he doing that to you? And I said, yes. At that time, I was told that he had this problem in the past, and he had separated from my mom. And then he went and got counseling, got help, came back to my mom and told her that he was all better now, and we'll adopt a boy to prove it. So I found out at that time that I was adopted to prove a point. So we made arrangements to move to Southern California at that time. My mom got down after the house was sold, and she moved everything down. When she got there, I found out she was smoking and stuff, and that always kind of struck me as, it kind of was painful. What I didn't know at the time is that she was dealing with all her own issues, and she was medicating herself. My mom started showing lots of anger towards me. It didn't take much to get her mad. I would get kicked out from times, and I'd go stay at a friend's house for a couple of days, and then everything would calm down, and she would come out and apologize and bring me back into the picture. And then after a while, after a few weeks or whatever, it would recycle. Going to school was hard. I couldn't focus or anything. I got put in special ed classes. I got labeled as a dummy or retard, they called it. It came to where I was like one person at church, another person at home, and another person at school. And I was just trying to fit in all these different places. I think the thing that really saved me is I started going to a church down there. So I made friends in the youth group. I met my wife there. Her name's Amy. So I get through high school, junior high and high school, jumped into the working world. About this time, I started dating my wife, Amy, and she had a brother that was into Volkswagens and Porsches and stuff. So I would always stop by and talk with him, and they knew me pretty good, and her mom knew me, and her sister knew me. And after a while, we started hanging around more, Amy and I did, and we decided we were going to get married, and got married. And shortly after we got married, she got pregnant, and we had our first daughter, Emily. And I was a dad, so I think it was a year later we decided to take a vacation, and it's like, let's go up to Spokane and see my sister. I'm like, okay, I'm up for it. I fell in love with the town, the stuff, all the fishing and the streams and the mountains and everything. I just thought it was neat. And so by the time we got home, I had made a decision that let's move to Spokane and we're going to do it. And I found a job. We got an apartment, and things were going pretty good. My middle daughter, Maisie, was born. About that time, it was 1996, and I don't remember how I found out that there was a process server trying to serve me legal papers. Turns out that my dad, Daniel Denning, is in jail. He had gotten a hold of a group of boys again, and they wanted me to come and testify what had happened to me while he was my dad. And I had to go to court and tell him everything he did to me and rehash all that stuff. I didn't want to go because I put that stuff behind me. I just wanted to move on and not deal with it anymore. A few days later, I get a letter in the mail from Sonoma County, from the DA. And it's just a newspaper clipping of what had happened to him, and a letter thanking me for coming down and telling my story. By the time he served all that time, he'd been too old. He's going to die in prison. So basically, I had some closure on that in that part of my life, to where I put him away for the rest of his life. He'll never hurt anyone again. So I started moving on with my life, and I'm doing a lot of snowboarding, and I'm working with the youth kids in our church group. There was one day we were up on the mountains. My wife was there, and my kids, and my buddy Dave, who's the youth pastor, and a friend of ours. Her name was Annie. We were coming down into the trees one time, and there's a little tiny jump going into the tree, and I crashed. Next thing I know, I'm on the bunny slope. I had a back concussion. I was repeating myself over and over. I had no idea how I got to that part. It was severe enough that they were thinking about calling in a helicopter and flying me off the mountain. At that point, this Annie lady told me she loved me, and I started wrestling with the whole fact of what is love. Flat out, at that point in my life, I don't know what love is. People that said they loved me were bad to me. People loved me, dropped me off in a foster home, give up on you. New dad molests me, tells me this is love. At this point, when Annie says she loves me, well, I know that stuff isn't love anymore. That was all fake love. I don't know. Do I really love Amy? Do I love this Annie? Does Annie love me? Does Amy love me? How can that be? How can I have two? That's not right. You know what I mean? I'm just really confused. I'm heading to this dark place. So one day I'm home alone and I'm sitting there and I'm watching people drive by in the big window, looking out on the busy street that we live on, thinking all these people had it together and they're so much better than me, and my wife deserves a better husband, my kids deserve a better dad. It'd be better if I just wasn't around. So I headed off to the bathroom and I started taking the pills in the bathroom. I just wanted to go to sleep, never wake up. And I took all the pills on the first shelf. And for some reason, I couldn't get any more down after that. It was like I was full, but I hadn't really taken that many yet. And this is probably the part that I look back on that I know God was in control of, because if I had taken the pills on the next shelf, I wouldn't be here right now. It would have done it. I would have been dead. I'm laying in the hall. I'm pretty drowsy from all the pills I took. That's all they did is make me drowsy. Amy comes home and she comes in the front door and she finds me in the hall. She had Emily and Maisie with her, and she kind of ducked them out of the way so they wouldn't see me. And she calls 911. I didn't want to go to the hospital. I didn't want to get in the ambulance. So they signed a piece of paper saying that they would keep an eye on me and follow up on whatever I needed to do. And so they all left. And the next day I went to counseling. And then she started the ball rolling. And within 2 or 3 days, I was off to inpatient.
All right, you guys okay? Curtis is here, so we got some good stuff. So this is my buddy, and in a very real way, even the fact that we're both sitting here today, being able to do this, is a huge Ebenezer for me. That court day that we were both there, that was an awful day. That was an awful day, and I never would have thought that day back in '96, which was on my birthday, which was a great way to spend a birthday, and that we would be here today praising the Lord for what He did from that point forward. So there's an amazing story that He's about to unfold to you, though, of God's sustaining in Him. And I want you to engage with this over the next 25 minutes or so. So, Curtis, you decided to go off to a treatment center. Talk a little bit about what even got you to go, that process, and then what you started to discover while you're there for the 35 days.
Well, at the very beginning, when I was heading to the treatment center, is when I didn't know it at the time, but as I look back, I see it was where God was totally starting to work. I mean, and it's clear to me. I went to the treatment center in Arizona, in Wickenburg, Arizona, called the Meadows, and even getting on the plane, I'm walking down the chute to get onto the plane, and I'm just walking, thinking to myself, I don't have to do this. I don't have to go. I'm a grown adult. I can turn around and just do what I want. I can go. I can leave. But as I'm walking, I'm thinking all that, but I'm still going forward, and I'm still going forward. And as I thought about that, I look back and I know it was God just like on my back, just pushing me to the plane. No, you're going to go, and you're going to deal with this stuff, and it's going to be good. You're going to learn. You're going to learn why this all happened. Inpatient was probably 35 days, probably the best time that I had at that point in my life. It was a safe place. Everybody had stuff going on in their life. Nobody was judged because nobody was better than anybody else. It was a real safe place. I started going through all the classes and the things they have you do to start unraveling all this stuff and how to deal with it, giving you the tools and learning what to do when you have those bad thoughts and that kind of stuff. While I was there, I realized that, this has all happened to me for a reason, and I wasn't going to let it get the best of me. I decided I'm going to tell my story. I'm going to go out when I get out of here, and I'm going to tell my story to people because I know there's people that need to hear it.
Yeah, you get home, and you were sharing with me that you're like, I want to tell my story to everyone, but no one's really asking for it.
Yeah.
No, I want to say something,
Yeah.
but no one's like, hey, tell us everything.
That was the one thing they told us when we left the hospital is like, you're going to get home and you're going to have all the answers for everybody, but no one's going to be asking the questions. And it's so true. They walk around telling people, hey, this is what I've experienced. And they're just like, okay.
So to kind of move things forward, you come home, you have 2 daughters at this time, but you decide you're going to recommit your vows with Amy and kind of have a fresh start there. You have a 3rd daughter, Mallory, and at some point in this, as your family's starting to become stronger and develop, you decide that you want to find your birth parents.
Yeah.
Talk about that with us.
Growing up, my last mom had told me, that your mom and dad are probably dead. They're probably not even alive, so don't bother even looking for them. She told me my mom was a drug addict, and my dad was a merchant sailor. And I was just like, okay. And, she didn't want me to find the truth, which is it's totally Satan. Satan doesn't want us to know the truth of anything. So I start thinking about that, and I start thinking about medical records and stuff, what can I expect when I get older, that kind of thing. And then I start thinking, well, it was probably a lie, I probably got a mom and dad out there, they're probably alive. So I start digging into that stuff, and I start looking, and, and I got adopted twice, at the second time I was 7, so I remember the adoption agency. It was Contra Costa County Adoption Agency. And so I found them up on the internet, and I called them up, and I said, hey, this is who I am. I want to find my biological parents. And they're like, well, we can't give you any information because your mom and dad aren't looking for you, so we can't open that file and give you anything. And so I was like, well, I kind of had a little leverage on them. I told them, you kind of screwed up my adoptions twice growing up, and my childhood was pretty much garbage because you guys misplaced me. They said, well, they told me to get a notarized letter and send it in, and we'll send you what we can send you. So I went through that. I got the letter notarized, sent it off, and they sent me a file, and it basically gave me some clues. It told me, my parents were from the southern Idaho area, Filer, Haley, Sun Valley, down in that area. And they gave me another clue that my dad worked in a sawmill, and he had been in a sawmill accident and got a cut on his leg. And so I had these clues, but still it wasn't enough. I never realized that when you're adopted at birth, they got to give you a new name. They got to give you a name to get the paperwork going. I always thought I was just Stephen Denning or Stephen Denton. That would be on my paperwork, and that was it. And I found a lady on the internet, and she did this for a living, and she found a way that she knew how to get into the files and get your birth name. So I found out I had a birth name. I got a hold of this lady. I called her and told her what I was doing, and I remember her telling me it's going to cost you about $1,500 to do this, and I'm like, I don't have $1,500. And she's like, well, you know what? You've done a lot of the hard work already. give me $100 and I'll get into the file and pull your birth name out. And I'm like,
This is like black market names.
Yeah.
That's good. I like it.
it doesn't go this way usually. I'm like, yeah, $100. If this lady's a fraud and she takes $100 from me, oh well, this is worth it to me. And so I gave her my information, where I was born, what hospital. I was born in San Francisco Hospital. And she called me the next morning, said, I got your information, send me $100 and I'll send you an email with your names. I'm like, okay. So I sent her the money, and just like that, got an email right away, and it came up. And there was my birth name. They named me Curtis. And I was just like, wow, that's my real name. That's who I was supposed to be all this time. I was supposed to be Curtis. My dad's last name was Cutler. And they gave me the initial CW Cutler. That's all I had on him. And my mom's maiden name was Bennett. Janice Bennett. So I had the names, and I got on the internet. The internet's amazing for this kind of stuff, because you can find anything about anybody if they've ever been on a computer. So
Yeah, that's good to know.
yeah, you can't hide. So I start looking in Filer and Haley and all these areas in southern Idaho. I just go through the white pages, and anything with the last name Cutler, I write down the name and their phone number, and I kept it all in a journal. And I just start calling these people at random. And I say, hey, I'm Steve Denning. I got adopted when I was 66. Do you know anything about this? And it was hilarious, because people are so funny. If you call someone like that, they're intrigued right away. I'm like, yeah, my mom and dad got pregnant in 66, and I was put up for adoption, and I'm looking for my biological parents. I had people saying things like, you know what, I got an uncle who would do something like that. We're having a family reunion. I'm going to ask him, what's your phone number? I'll get back to you. I'm like, okay. I'm calling churches, asking if there's any Cutlers in their congregation. You know, I want to talk to the old people, because I know the old people know everything, and they love to tell people about it. So, and I'm really getting nowhere, you know. I'm talking to all these people and telling them what I'm doing. And a few days go by, and I actually went out of town for a little while. I went on a little vacation, and I came back, went to work, came home one day, and said, I'm going to go through this list again, and I'm going to call all these people that didn't answer. I made a note, left a message, no answer, answer machine or whatever. If I got a hold of them, I crossed them off. So I went through the whole list that evening, nowhere. And for some reason, I just went, I'm going to try the ones I didn't get a hold of again. And I called the very first number on it. And this lady answers. And I say, hey, my name is Steve Denning. I went through my whole thing. And she goes, yeah, my husband's name is Cutler. And at that point, I think I told her, what was he hurt in a sawmill in 1965? And she's like, how do you know about the sawmill accident? And I'm like, well, my adoption agency gave me some tips or some information. And at that point, I was like, I found him. It's just like, okay, so I'm talking with her, and we're just kind of chatting, and all of a sudden, my dad pulls up in the driveway, and she goes running out with the phone saying, Carl, his name's Carl, your son's on the phone, your son's on the phone. And she didn't know about me either. They just got married a few years ago. So this was all news to her. And he had two boys with his previous wife, so he probably thought just, one of his sons is calling him. So he gets on the phone, and I tell him who I am, and I ask him, did you put a baby up for adoption in 1966? And he's like, yeah, we did. And I go, well, what'd you name him? And he goes, well, we named him Curtis. I'm like, yeah, that's the name I got, Curtis Cutler. And he goes, yeah. And I always kept these little questions, because I wanted to make sure that he had the same information I had. And I asked him, I go, well, what was my mom's name? And he goes, well, your mom's name was Janice Bennett. And I'm like, yeah, the same information I got. And he goes, I guess I'm your dad. So, and it's funny, because my wife walked into the room about that time. She wasn't home when I was doing this. And she walked into the room, and she says, I'm sitting there shaking. And I'm like, I found him. I found my dad. So we talked for a while, and he's like, you want to come down? I want to meet my granddaughters, you know. I told him you have 3 granddaughters, and I'm married and got a wife, and he goes, you got to come down. I want to meet them. And I'm like, oh, okay. Originally, he had said, I'd come down and meet you, and I'm going to ride my motorcycle down. He's like, how are you going to fit your family on a motorcycle? I'm like, true.
So then you decide to go for your mom. You said, man, I'm on a...
Yeah. Before I hung up, I said, so do you know where my mom is? Have you talked to her? And he said, no, I haven't talked to her since '66. I don't know. He didn't know where she was at. But my mom had a niece that still lived in Haley, Idaho, and my dad had her phone number. So he gave me her phone number, and I asked her, can you tell me where my mom is, or can I have her phone number? After I called her, and she says, no, I'm not giving you her number. Give me your number, and if she wants to get a hold of you, she'll call you. So I go, that's fair enough, and I hang up the phone, and an hour or 2 go by later, and the phone rings. And it's not a long-distance ring. That back when you had home lines, you know, the phone ring was like a different, long-distance ring was different. So I knew it was a local call, and I told my wife, you know, don't stay on the phone. That was one of her friends, and don't tie up the line. So I pick up the phone, and I'm all irritated, and I'm just like, hello. And I'm all rude. And there's this little voice that says, is this Stephen Denning? And I say, yeah. And then it started to dawn on me. And she goes, well, I think I'm your mom. And I'm like, whoa. And then right away, I start thinking about the ring on the phone. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is local. And her next question was, where do you live? I said, well, I live in Spokane, Washington. And she goes, oh, my God. And she goes, I live in Meade. And that's like 10 minutes from my house. So we've been living in the same area for, I think, like 15 years or something like that. You know, we probably passed each other at Costco or the grocery store. When I first moved to Spokane, I used to drive all over the place because grew up in the LA area, and now I'm out in the country, and this is fun exploring. And when I first got to Spokane, I drove to this lake in January, and it was frozen, and it was called Diamond Lake, and she lived in Diamond Lake at the time. I mean, before I even started looking for her, I was within a couple of miles of the house where she lived. So we were in this area together.
Yeah. You said to me that you felt like God said, you've done a lot of the hard work. I'm going to give you your mom.
Yeah, you know, I did. I noticed God working at this time. You know, earlier in my life, I would think that's a coincidence. You know, my mom's in the same town. But as I thought back, it's like, you know what? This was God saying, you've done a lot of hard work, and you need a mom. You need that hole filled. So I'm going to give you your mom, you know, 10 minutes from you so you can be with her every day if you want. So. Yeah.
And how's that relationship now?
It's great. I mean, I see her every week, twice a week sometimes. She started coming to our church. We've done trips together, our whole family, and we go there for Christmas, holidays. We do the whole family thing now. So
let me show you. There's a picture of him and his mom, just so you can kind of. Yes, he does have a Seahawks shirt on, but forgive him for that. It has to come up. It's amazing that we're friends, even though there's that whole thing going on. He also discovers that he has a brother and a sister. And here's a picture of his dad, his mom, his brother, and his sister. And he realized when he meets his brother that he actually had met him 5 years before that at another event, but didn't even know that he was brothers. I
met my brother 5 years before I ever even started looking for my family, just from a mutual friend we had. So it was like, and I remember when we first saw him the first time, he works at a fire station, and my wife and I are like, we look a lot alike. And we just blocked it out. No, there's no way.
So you realize you have a birthday, but your family was all, last name was Denning. And you talk about how that you were like, man, you realized who you were, and now your family goes through this whole transformation with you, with names and everything else. Talk about that
when my wife and I got married, I was not happy with the Denning name. I wanted nothing to do with that family. When I was an inpatient, I had a family week time, and my mom came, and she lied through the whole thing. And I decided at that point that they weren't good for me, and I don't want anything to do with them. I ditched the Denning name, and when I found my dad, the first time I went down to visit him, I asked him, can I take the Cutler name? And he said, yeah, I'd be honored if you take the Cutler name. So I changed my name to Curtis Cutler the way it's supposed to be, so the paperwork's back to the way it's supposed to be. And my wife changed her last name to Cutler. My kids changed their last name to Cutler. It was kind of a drawn-out process, a lot of legal papers and stuff, but we got it changed. And
Yeah, you shared with me your parents
I
paid for that.
Yeah, my parents paid for the whole thing. It was kind of spendy, but they wanted me to be a Cutler. They want me to be their kid. I mean, I've gotten inheritance from them. I made it clear when I found them that, I'm not doing this for money. I'm not doing this to get back at you. I just want to know if I have a mom and dad out there, and if it never worked out, can I get some medical records, so I can know what to expect for my family.
Yeah. They put you in the will. They take you all the way back in. How did it feel?
It's wild. I've learned over the years to accept gifts. I used to reject gifts a lot, and people would be like, don't reject gifts. People want to give you something. You need to say thank you and accept it, because if you reject it from them, you're kind of insulting them.
Yeah.
And,
it's amazing. A young boy, tossed and turned and no identity, and then God had something for you after all this time. And we've talked like, why does God wait? Why does it take time? And you shared with me that God knew that the right time was going to be the right time,
If I had never moved to Spokane, this probably never would have happened. I never would have hit bottom, and living down in Southern California close to my mom at the time, it would have never happened. God wouldn't have allowed it. God's timing is amazing.
Yeah.
Got to be patient. I've learned that.
We had another picture I just want to show you of him and his family with his 3 daughters who are here as well.
They are here.
And just a celebration of that. So, Curtis, as you look back, God's played an amazing role throughout your life. Sometimes, man, there's probably no view of that, and other times you felt him pushing you forward. But there's going to be people here this morning that are struggling because of circumstances of life that may feel like, man, where is God? God is distant. What words would you have for them this morning?
When I was an inpatient, I realized my purpose in life. And when I got home, I read the book, the Rick Warren book, Purpose Driven. And I took my past and I decided that I was going to tell people, like I said earlier, and that kind of confirmed it to me. My purpose in life was to go and tell people my story. Back when I was going through my stuff, I felt like I had no one to talk to. I couldn't let anyone know what happened to me because they would judge me, or they would think I was weird or weak or something. And I decided to tell my story, and I'm going to keep telling my story because people need to talk. And I would encourage everyone out there, just if you have a story, whether it's good or bad or whatever your story is, to tell it, because somewhere someone needs to hear it. Someone needs to know that they're not alone.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to invite our worship team out, and we're going to sing a song of response to all this. But there's some things I just wanted to share with you, some things that Curtis has either said to me or he's written in a blog that he has. I just want to kind of sum some of this stuff up. First one is what he just said, is that everybody has a story, and we need to let people in. And you emphasize that's what Christ did. Christ got into people's stories, and how powerful that was and how freeing that was for you when you just said, I'm just going to start telling them my story. Second thing that I found from one of the blogs that he wrote is that he says, I see the bad stuff, but forget to focus on the good stuff that God has done with it. So I need to quit letting the bad stuff in life get to me and start focusing on what I'm doing with it. I love telling my story to people, and I hope it never gets old. There's a reason why it all happened. I think that's a sustaining truth for us and how God redeems that. And the final thing, which I found is so powerful too. It says, he wrote, all my life, going to church seemed to be about listening to someone talk about a book they have read. Doing church is listening to someone's experiences in life. That's the stuff that drives me. I would rather listen to someone share their horrible life with me and how they struggle from day to day, where they have been, and how God has rescued them. I think you summed up what doing church really is, and not to go through the motions, but to be honest and to share and say, this is what God has done in my life so far. And when you feel like he's left you, you still share, because this is what this life is about, and God is with us and sustains us. And that sticks with me, and that speaks to me that we should never just go through the motions, but make it about real stuff and what God is doing. Let me just pray, and then our team's going to lead us to a song that I think wraps up this time so well. Father, I thank you for Curtis. I thank you for his wife, Amy, and all that she has done in his life and their life, for their daughters, Father, that for Emily and Maisie and for Mallory, God, and just how you've had your hand on them. God, each one of us has a story, and some of it is dark, and some of it is painful, but yet you walk with us. As David wrote in Psalm 23, we walk through the valley of the shadow of death at times, but you are with us. God, I thank you for all that you have done, that through all of it you have sustained and you have breathed life into him for certain times. God, that you have restored him to a family and you have shown him what love is really all about. And even though it seemed to be so far away, you brought him back. God, for each of us, there's people here, Father, I know that needed to hear this today and know that you are their God and that you have them and that you do have something for them in the right time. God, I pray that we would always be a church that does church well and listen to hear each other and not be something where we ever go through the motions. Father, as we sing this song back to you, that we sing praise to you, Father, and just may we be open and honest. In your name, amen.